Hey everybody, good evening. So my name is Andrew Young and I wanted to take a moment today to talk about a concert I went to last night. This was the co-headlining tour between Breaking Benjamin and Five Finger Death Punch. I saw this show at Jiffy Lube Live in Bristow, Virginia, and I can't wait to give you guys my thoughts on it. So one thing that was really unique about this tour that I kind of found myself attracted to from the start is that this tour features two huge juggernauts in the American rock and metal community. For example, we have Breaking Benjamin, who has put together a wildly successful career over the past decade full of great albums and singles such as The Diary of Jane and Breath, and albums like Phobia and Dear Agony, and an amazing record in Ember that I'll get into in a second that came out earlier this year. On the other hand, we have Five Finger Death Punch, which is kind of newer into the heavy metal hard rock scene that kind of came on toward the end of the first decade of the 2000s, putting out tracks and albums that have really kind of developed a cult following within the music scene. They've put out records like Injustice for None, which was released earlier this year, in addition to records like American Capitalist and The Way of the Fist, which were two very powerful albums that kind of catapulted them right into the mainstays of the American metal scene. So just a little bit of background on both bands. I want to start with Breaking Benjamin. So I'll say this straight up, I'm kind of a Breaking Benjamin fanboy. I've loved this band, I've grown up with them. Songs like The Diary of Jane, Water, Lights Out, Dance with the Devil are songs that I've grown up with over the course of my 20 years on Earth. I've associated them with great memories, and for me, Breaking Benjamin is one of my favorite live bands ever because I remember seeing them on the 2016 Disturbed Alter Bridge Saint Asonia tour for the first time. And I remember going into that show with not a whole lot of expectations, especially given lead singer Benjamin Burnley's throat illness that's been bugging him for years and years and years. And so I remember going into that show and I just remember being totally taken aback, totally surprised by how much I enjoyed their set, and really surprised with how much I connected with those songs even after years away from listening to them. Even after, years apart from that catalog, I remember just loving that set. And for that reason, every time they come through the DC area, I go and see them because it's great to associate those tracks with those memories I made growing up. And so, for example, I saw them at the Fillmore in Silver Spring, Maryland, a really tight venue last January. And I remember going there and I thought it was a really amazing experience to see Breaking Benjamin in such a small venue playing these songs that I love. And I'll get into it in a second, but the new album that they put out this year, Ember, was absolutely fantastic. Their new record, Ember, is honestly my album of the year across all platforms. That album for me was exactly what I wanted for Breaking Benjamin. It gave us something new, it gave us something raw and something heavy. It produced amazing tracks like Feed the Wolf, Blood, Red Cold River, Down, Torn in Two, songs that I still come back to months after its release. And for me, that album was awesome because it wasn't a grower at all. It was something that I listened to the first try around, and I knew from there were banger after banger after banger after banger. And for me, I just saw the place in the catalog where these songs can fit like a puzzle piece. That album for me is something I continue to come back to, not only for my listening at the gym, my listening, working out or driving in the car. It's something I come back to because it gives me the same thing I've known from Breaking Benjamin over the course of their career, that same angsty energy that I, grown up with as a kid, but it's innovated their sound in a way, made them darker, made them heavier, made them toe the line between rock and metal more. And I thought that was a risk that was beautifully played and ultimately made it into my album of the year. The other co-headliner on this bill, Five Finger Death Punch, myself and that band have kind of a complicated relationship with regard to their material. This is a band that I've heard hype about for years and years and years, and I've always given chance after chance after chance to try their music. And for me, I guess to describe my relationship with their music, at best, it's spotty. This band is one that I've returned to over and over and over again to try to like, and for whatever reason, I just can't really get into. For me, I think a lot of where I hit roadblocks with their music is in its lyricism. A lot of times I find Ivan Moody's lyricism to be very immature, very basic, formulaic, kind of generic for the genre of, active rock and roll, and heavy metal. And for that reason, they kind of stick out like a sore thumb when I listen to their music. But that's really unfortunate because this is a band I want to love and I want to get more into because I think they channel a really great brute aggression and a really great sense of adrenaline from their fan base and from their music. That said, they have put out some good tracks that I've enjoyed before. For example, the song Battleborn from their double album that they put out a few years ago, or Burn It Down from their War Is the Answer record. I think all of those tracks have really kind of hit me in the right spot, hit me in the aggressive place they've wanted me to go. I've really enjoyed those tracks, but generally speaking, I just can't get into this band. That said, I'm glad I saw them live. I'm going to talk about it later because their live performance totally changed the game for me in terms of my opinion on that band. So like Breaking Benjamin, Five Finger Death Punch also put out a record this year. It was called And Justice for None. And for me, that record was honestly a train wreck. I returned to it a few times in preparation for seeing them on Friday night, and for me, that album had very few highlights. And that's unfortunate because I wanted to like it. I wanted to check it out and love these songs, but for me, I couldn't get past Ivan Moody's often immature lyricism. It just kind of threw off any sort of vibe that the music had going for it, and ultimately made for a really unenjoyable experience that I thought was bloated and kind of redundant. For me, one thing I will say with regard to a highlight on that record, I think the song I Refuse is fairly strong. I think it adds to a strong collection of overall ballads from Five Finger Death Punch. We've seen some fairly strong songs in the ballad department from Five Finger Death Punch, like Remember Everything, like Battleborn, and that song really kind of adds to a nice collection, but besides that, that album really didn't do anything for me, and it's unfortunate because I really wanted to like that album. I really wanted to like the album prior to it, Got Your Six, but neither of them really just did anything for me at all. So getting into the actual show itself, so Five Finger Death Punch and Breaking Benjamin were on a co-headlining bill. They played for the exact same amount of time, and the first band to take the stage at 6 o'clock was Bad Wolves. And Bad Wolves is a band that I actually saw back in May opening up for Five Finger Death Punch and Shinedown when I saw them in Roanoke, Virginia. And for me, Bad Wolves has presented some good material. I really enjoy their Disobey album generally, but their live show really didn't do anything for me whatsoever. And that's not the fault of the band because I enjoy the songs. It was mostly in the mixing. I thought that they sounded very muddy. I could barely hear what Tommy Vext was singing, and it overall just kind of made for a really unnecessarily noisy performance that I couldn't really enjoy just because the mixing was so poor. So while disappointed by Bad Wolves' set, I was really excited for Nothing More. I've really enjoyed that band. They've put out some really great tracks. For example, This Is the Time, Jenny. I enjoyed their album, The Stories We Tell Ourselves. It had songs like Go to War on it and songs like Just Say When. And I was really excited to see how their set would be. And to my surprise, I found them very eccentric, very energetic, and I thought they were a very good opening band for this tour because they did exactly what an opening band should do. They pumped the crowd up for the headliners. And for me, I really enjoyed their set because it did just that. It pumped everybody up. It got everybody excited for Five Finger, which was playing next. And for that reason, I think they were very effective. They played the song Go to War. They played the song Jenny. They played the song This Is the Time. And for me, those were the only three I really wanted to see that badly, and I think they were very effective. One thing I love about Nothing More is that they've gotten some respect also from huge places in the music industry. They've been nominated for Grammys, and I thought that the new album they put out, The Stories We Tell Ourselves, was a phenomenal album. So it's nice to see a band get some recognition, be on a big tour, get recognition from the Grammys, put out a good album. It's kind of cool to see how this band has risen up, and I hope they continue to rise up even further. So coming onto the stage at 8 o'clock was Five Finger Death Punch, and as I said earlier in the video, generally speaking, their studio music hasn't been for me at all. I haven't found anything particularly of interest in their studio music that has made me want to return to it. But that said, oh my gosh, I was so wrong about them live. They put on an amazing show, and they really kind of gave me what I like to call the Breaking Benjamin effect, which is when you don't have a certain expectation for a band when you see them live the first time, and then they blow you away. And honestly, Five Finger Death Punch did just that for me. And for me, Five Finger Death Punch put on the perfect show to prove me wrong about them. They made me want to go check out their material in the studio and give it another shot because they brought a brute energy to the stage. I thought that Ivan Moody was a very sincere but energetic frontman who sounded awesome, and the band sounded super tight. I thought they engaged the crowd super well. As a matter of fact, there was a moment in the set where they brought a bunch of kids up on stage to do Remember Everything, and I thought that was one of the most powerful moments of the entire show. So essentially what I'm trying to say here is that Five Finger Death Punch in some ways proved me wrong with their live performance. Their set was, I thought, super powerful. It was loaded with powerful hits that got the crowd involved, that got the crowd pumped and energetic, and they commanded the stage like a headliner. For me, to be kind of someone who's been on the edge with this band, someone who hasn't particularly liked this band in the past, they put on the perfect show for me to be like, all right, cool, I'll check them out again, maybe go into their set a little more excited next time. They put on the best show humanly possible for a non-fan to see, and for that, I thought that was awesome. I think they were a really great addition to this tour. I was initially pretty skeptical about them because I've been so iffy on their studio material, but they ran through all their songs. The entire crowd was super into them, singing them right back to them. And one thing I loved about their set is that it played off the adrenaline from their studio recordings. So a lot of times when you hear the studio recordings and you hear maybe an immature lyric or two, a lot of times you blame that on adrenaline. Well, when you're in the moment and you're seeing one of your favorite bands as a huge Five Finger fan, like for other people, you don't care about that. You're in the moment. You're seeing one of your favorite bands. You're using the adrenaline. And I thought Five Finger really captured that adrenaline perfectly. And for me, like I said a million times, this performance really changed the game for me. This really changed my opinion on this band. It made me want to go check them out, give them another shot. And honestly, I thought they were right up there with Breaking Benjamin for the best performance of the night. Honestly, me changing my tune on Five Finger Death Punch was probably the biggest surprise of the night. And I thought it was awesome. I thought it was something that really put the show on another level. As a matter of fact, I got through Five Finger Death Punch's set, enjoying it so much and just so surprised that by the end of the set, I forgot that we also had a Breaking Benjamin set, a set from my favorite band still to come. And I love when tours do that with co-headlining bills. Generally speaking, I don't really like co-headliners because they split both bands and you get less of each band. But when you get through one set and you're content with what you've got, and then you remember, oh yeah, by the way, there's another good band that's gonna come on afterward, it presents an amazing situation. For example, I went to a co-headliner between Linkin Park and 30 Seconds to Mars once. And I got through the 30 Seconds set and I was super satisfied, but then I remembered, oh hey, Linkin Park is coming. So that was a really cool situation that I was in last night, in the sense that I had that same feeling. And my favorite band, Breaking Benjamin, was about to come on, and I thought it just made that experience all the more better. So one of my first observations with Breaking Benjamin's set is that I felt like they went for a different vibe than Five Finger Death Punch. I felt like Death Punch's set was much more adrenaline-filled, much more show-based. They were really kind of focused on getting the audience involved, getting everybody pumped up, focusing on this adrenaline. And I thought Breaking Benjamin was much darker, much more ambient, and I thought one of the first ways you saw this was actually in the stage lighting. So for example, Benjamin Burnley, a lot of times in the show, he was obscured from view. He was kind of in the shadows. I don't really know why that was, but it reminded me a lot of A Perfect Circle and Tool's Maynard James Keenan. He was just very kind of hidden, and generally speaking, the band members were kind of hidden as well. The stage was very dark. You could see the silhouettes of all the band members, and while kind of a left turn from what I'm used to with Breaking Benjamin, I thought it fit, especially with this vibe of Ember. Ember being a darker record, Ember being a record that was much moodier, much more angsty, much more aggressive. I thought it kind of fit that vibe to have a darker stage presence, to have one that was more ambient, more mysterious. I thought it worked pretty well. I thought that was generally hit or miss for fans. I've seen a lot of complaints about the fact that a lot of the band members weren't really visible, but I thought it was fine. Breaking Benjamin went through a 16-song set that included their biggest hits like So Cold, Until the End, The Diary of Jane, Red Cold River, which they opened with, Breath. I thought it was a set that was loaded with good songs. Not a whole lot of deep cuts, but I didn't really feel that was necessary with this co-headlining nature of the tour. I thought this set was very effective. For me personally, one gripe I did have with Breaking Benjamin's set is, having seen them 3 times now, they seem to have the same set over and over and over again. And what I mean by this in particular is that they do the same covers medley that they've done for 3 years straight. They'll do Smells Like Teen Spirit, they'll do the Star Wars theme song, they'll do Sad But True by Metallica, they'll do a few others. And for me, I thought that was super cool and a super cool left turn the first time I saw them, but 3 times in, I think it gets kind of old. For me though, I thought it was really cool to see how that covers medley kind of went over with the rest of the fans that hadn't seen them before, so I think it was cool in that regard. But as a returning fan, as someone who's seen them before, I think that's something that gets kind of old. But that said, aside from that, I thought Breaking Benjamin complemented Five Finger Death Punch very well. I thought that the moody vibe that they put on perfectly kind of counteracted the vibe that Five Finger Death Punch came with Adrenaline. And in my last video with Shinedown and Godsmack's co-headlining tour, I kind of mentioned this yin and yang effect that both bands presented. And I think it's very well done a lot of times on a co-headlining tour where you have 2 bands that have this similar yin and yang effect. And I thought Breaking Benjamin and Five Finger Death Punch, while closer stylistically than Shinedown and Godsmack are, I felt that they kind of achieved this same yin and yang because they put on 2 different live performances. And I think that was very well executed here. For me, I am so glad that on this co-headlining bill, Five Finger Death Punch played first and that my favorite band played last. Because the last time I saw Five Finger Death Punch with Shinedown, I actually left Five Fingers set early. And for me, having them play first this time and having to sit there and check out Five Fingers' entire set, that was probably the best way it could have been set up for me, because I actually got to be proven wrong. I got to sit there and see how they bring it, and I got to really be impressed and proven wrong. And them complimented by my favorite band in Breaking Benjamin playing hit after hit after hit that I've associated these memories with, it created a really strong experience, and ultimately my tour of the summer. I had a blast with this tour. I really enjoyed it. I thought both bands complemented each other super well. I thought the opening bands complemented the headliners very well. And yes, while it's a co-headliner, and ultimately sometimes I have gripes with co-headliners, I thought this one was done very well, and I walked away super satisfied from this tour. So, if you're on the fence about going and seeing this tour, if you don't like Five Finger, if you don't like Breaking Benjamin, buy the ticket, because you might be proven wrong. I had a blast with this tour. I would totally go see it again if I had a chance to. Definitely check it out if it comes through a town near you. I had a blast with it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your night.